Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video, we are looking at Bitcoin. It is time for another update. And we've had some very interesting developments on this chart as we followed through within a rather unlikely structure. Yeah, we fell below our area of support. Yeah, much below. But we did still extend to higher prices. So we really need to assess here the latest developments. But before we get into those, I wanted to provide the context for the larger structure. So here we have been tracking within our yellow/orange interpretation this ABC structure. Within this wave C in orange, we have been looking for continuation to lower prices, but only against the previous swing high here, only as long as we didn't manage to create another high, a reset of an internal wave 4 in this structure. And since that happened, it wasn't going to be a realistic expectation really. We did get rejected at the 50% retracement, which was above that, but still we broke the area of resistance now and doesn't seem too relevant anymore, does it? Now, nonetheless, we are still looking ideally for a bottom to be in place within this structure. Not a must, yeah, we could see extensions to lower prices within certain scenarios, but in the idea of a bottom being in place here, we would expect to reach at least the 79.9k level, yeah, the 38.2% retracement, and this is what we will be tracking here in the yellow interpretation. So, we provided an internal level of support, an internal support zone, down to the 62.6k level. We did touch it quite perfectly. We got the reaction to the upside, we got the reversal, and now technically we could be considering to have a 5-wave pattern in a wave C in this area, although the structure is looking quite awful to be honest, and we need to either assume some distortions or that the structure would be rather incomplete. Now, in the previous video, we were strongly preferring to look for continuation to higher prices directly within a wave 3 in this movement to the upside. Yeah, we were looking for a wave C in the yellow interpretation, so we were looking to build a 5-wave pattern, right? Now, we seem to have broken the area of support we provided in the previous video, quite substantially even. However, we did achieve within what we did build in this movement to the upside the ideal target for a wave 3, which is the 138.2% extension of the wave 1, right? We achieved it perfectly, we touched it, and then we got rejected. Now, we cannot dismiss the idea of a wave 3 being in place in this area based on that data point. However, for a follow-up correction in a wave 4, we would have still liked to at least hold the 61.8% retracement. So we have a rather incomplete pattern within this wave 3. Sure, it can happen, we can assume some distortions. We have a failure to hold the internal levels of support for a follow-up wave 4, but we still managed to extend to higher prices. So this is telling us that the interpretation is rather unlikely, that we probably need to consider other scenarios. But it is really difficult to identify any reliable structure in this movement to the upside, and I wouldn't even bother too much with it. I would either assume the deepest level of support possible for such an expectation, or who knows, maybe even an unlikely structure to work out, which is exactly this idea of a 5-wave pattern being actually in place. And to be honest, even if this is a 5-wave pattern, it's not really going to provide necessarily a highly relevant area of support. We could be looking, sure, for a 1-2 setup even, but it's not an initial 5-wave move to the upside. Remember, we were tracking here an ABC structure, which could be a top within a different correction, as we haven't yet reached the first level of resistance within the yellow scenario that starts at around 80k. Now, in that scenario, I will provide a preliminary area of support we can track for such an expectation, so I will be watching the levels between 70.5k down to 65.2k. We can track continuation to higher prices within, let's say, a white structure against the support zone. We can even notice that within the movement to the downside from the current top, we have only a 3-wave pattern perfectly into the 50% retracement, where we did create a so far acceptable reaction. Yeah, we will actually track more about that in a moment. But currently, we have a potential bottom in place. We could be looking even for a quite strong wave 3 to be taking place in a quite direct fashion. But we do have the risk, once again, of having a completely different structure building on this chart. So I have prepared this idea of an A, B, C pattern that could be forming internally. In this assumption, we would have a resistance area that would have already been reached. We would have a three-wave pattern into it, and we would have the first three waves within an initial 5-wave move to the downside. This interpretation is not necessarily the highest possible threat yet, but if we build here an initial 5-wave pattern within this movement to the downside as a wave 1, I would have to look with high likelihood for a 3-wave correction and then trend continuation within at least another 5-wave move to the downside, which could theoretically still be within the area of support in white, could still build to just a larger 3-wave correction, but we are looking for the signs, we are looking for the signals of which outcome is going to be more likely. And for me, I will be watching the idea of an initial 5-wave pattern internally in this movement. So I will be watching the 50% retracement, for a correction in a wave 4 that would build our initial 5-wave move to the downside. So we have here the 71.8k level that we need to break, the 50% retracement, where so far in this pattern we can notice that we pushed very much perfectly into the 38.2% retracement with what has so far developed, which is the ideal target for a wave 4. Now, this actually is telling us that we would need to be prepared to extend directly to lower prices, and we will track this, of course, in orange, because even within the idea of a 1-2 setup we could track in white, in this structure, we could see that extension. So right now, I am looking for a break above the 50% retracement in orange for a signal that this structure is not going to build an initial 5-wave move to the downside. It doesn't mean that it cannot extend lower afterwards, but it does signal that this structure, at the very least, that would be potentially quite bearish, wouldn't be unfolding. And if you value having these roadmaps, these levels of support, of resistance, I would recommend to subscribe, as we keep everything as up to date as possible. We want everyone in our community to have the most relevant levels to watch available at any point, and to be aware of the most likely outcomes within these structures based on these levels that we provide. Now, in this structure, I will of course add here a 1-2 that could allow a wave 3 to have already started. And for this idea, I can provide already the ideal target for a supposed wave 3 that would be the 138.2% extension of a wave 1, the 90k level, although this target would be defined by the wave 2 bottom. So if we get another reset within a wave 2, we would need to readjust the ideal target for a wave 3. And before we end the video, I do want to provide the word of caution once again, that this structure we are tracking in white that would allow a wave 3 to be forming in this area is not a particularly high probability interpretation. It doesn't need to form, it's not an initial 5-wave move to the upside, and if we want, we can still track continuation to higher prices within a larger A, B, C structure in what we have in yellow basically, where this is an A, B, C pattern, and in that case, the area of support we would currently track would need to be adjusted, and it would be at the levels between 69.5k down to that 63.3k level. Already with a break below the white support zone, below 65k, we would be looking at a slight probability shift, but with the break below the 78.6% retracement in yellow, we are looking at a quite strong indication, a further signal that this structure is likely going to play out within the red scenario. Now, sure, we have some additional structural support at these last levels of support, actually both in white and in yellow, but we would still not want to see a sustained break below, ideally even the white support zone, but especially below the yellow support zone. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and if you enjoy our content and want to support us directly, check out our channel membership. And as a thank you for any of these actions, I would like to invite you to sign up to our channel newsletter, where you get access to our monthly top picks, where we identify for you high quality structures The link for sign up is in the description and it is completely free. Other than that, let me know what else you would like me to cover and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.